think you won't agree with that, Zia.
Well, look, I would like to go back to Tom's question at the beginning as to whether tax rises are inevitable. Mark my words, they absolutely are. Labour and the Tories are pretty much exactly the same. Labour would just do what the Tories do a little bit faster. People in this country are struggling. They're struggling. They're seeing the cost of their weekly shop go up every time they seem to go to the supermarket. Rents seem to go up all of the time. If you have a mortgage, you know, the borrowing costs under Labour are higher than they were even under the disaster of Liz Truss. And let's not even get started about energy costs, the energy bills. People are petrified to open their energy bill because of the ridiculous net zero policies. British people suffer the most expensive energy bills in the world. People are struggling. And I will say this too. British people throughout history have been willing to take pain, willing to make sacrifices for the greater good. But as the gentleman in the front row said, how can you look British people in the eyes and say, make the sacrifices when there's infinite money, apparently, for citizens of foreign countries, whether it's people coming across in small boats, asylum hotels at $5 billion a year, $15 billion a year in foreign aid, or the Chagos Islands to cede sovereign territory and then rent it back at the cost of $30 billion. And by the way, that's funded. That is funded Mauritians. 80% of Mauritian workers are exempt from tax, while the tax burden on British people is at the highest level since World War II. There's nothing at all about it that's remotely acceptable. We've got to prioritise citizens of the United Kingdom. That's what reform will do.
Can't do is claw. But look, I just want to tackle this issue about Labour being the same as the Tories, because I find it personally offensive. I mean, we've increased the national minimum wage, we're building a new generation of council houses, we've extended free school meals to every kid in school that's on universal credit, we're paying our doctors and nurses the salaries they've been looking for years as a consequence of our investment. We've increased spending on doctors and nurses for the last 2 years when the Tories wouldn't even talk to doctors and nurses, which is why they were on strike. The thing that is the same is when Reform and the Conservatives give you the simple answers to complex promises, but do not tell you how they're going to do it. Those are the questions you should be answering.
Can I just respond to that? I'll tell you what's offensive is insulting the intelligence of the British people.
I didn't. I insulted your intelligence. Answer the question.
You're entitled to insult my intelligence. You're not entitled to insult the intelligence of British people.
How?
Earlier on, you described an obvious tax hike in the form of council tax increases of 5%.
There's no answer.
Council tax increases of 5%. You described it, and I'm quoting, as a, quote, tax change. Apparently it's a tax change. The British people are sick and tired of being gaslit, and the Prime Minister of this country does it. You can see it on his social media account all of the time. You are unwilling to be honest with the British people. You consistently prioritise foreign citizens over the citizens of this country. And it's time you owed up to that and you stood by your conviction.
You did not answer the question how you do anything you've promised. I say what the British people are sick of, and that's false promises. That's why they voted for change at the election last year.
Well, look, we are going to come to that later, so feel free to hold your fire on that, because you will be...
And when you see that the majority of the people in these boats are children, babies and women who have been...
No, they're not. No, they're not.
No, you have got to take... No, look, I get this is...
North of 90% of them are adult men.
Let me be... No.
Hang on, you're saying that's not true?
No, look, this is why it's controversial.
It's not true. Is it true or
I'm saying it's not true. Now, and I'm saying...
Zia.
Well, in my previous answer, I made the case that this government prioritises foreign citizens over citizens of the United Kingdom. After that testimony, I can rest my case.
How do you rest that case?
So number one, well, you were just talking about. So number one, the vast majority of the people making the journey from France by small boat are fighting-age, military-age males, not women and children. That's the first point. I don't know if the BBC real-time fact-checkers are working this evening or not. They seem to be when I speak, but let's see. That's the first point. The second point I would make is that, you know, we're talking about asylum hotels and Rachel Reeves saying we're going to shut down asylum hotels. There was a report today that this Labour government is not only renting hotel spaces, they're actually going to buy hotels at the taxpayers' dime. Can you just categorically deny that that is the case? That this government, this Labour government, is spending taxpayers' money purchasing hotels in order to house illegal immigrants and asylum seekers?
We own government...
Well, yes,
I'm answering your question. We own government-owned temporary accommodation for when people are waiting for a dietitian. That is true. But
so you're not buying any more?
Well, we've had to buy some to get out of hotels, but it's temporary accommodation. It's cheaper to do it that way. But look, when you say that this means that the government is prioritising foreigners over the British people, you have to explain what you mean by that.
OK, let me explain what I mean.
True.
I spent many weeks in the constituency of Runcorn and Helsby. Runcorn is a very deprived area. And do you know the issue that exercised people so much and why you lost that seat with the massive swing to Sarah Pochin? The reason is primarily because of HMOs, houses of multiple occupancy. So not the actual hotels. In an unholy alliance of Serco and Yvette Cooper, the Labour Home Secretary, illegal migrants are being deposited into communities where there's no say for the local people about it, people from alien cultures. There's a lot of crime as a result of this. And what takes this to Bond villain levels of wickedry, there are Section 21 eviction notices being given to British tenants, including, and in my inbox I have examples of veterans, including one who is suffering PTSD, who received a Section 21 eviction notice because Serco, at the behest of the Home Office, at the behest of Keir Starmer, is offering 5 to 7 year contracts, 20 to 30% above market rates, to house illegal migrants and asylum seekers. And as a result of that, British people are being turfed out onto the street. There's nothing about that that's remotely acceptable, and it's why the social contract in this country is hanging by a thread.
So, Zia, just be clear, because one of the things that your boss, Nigel Farage, has talked about is sending, if they come over on a boat, and you refer to it, Simon, if people come over in a boat, you turn it around and dump them back on the beach in France. Practically
impossible.
How would that happen? How would you persuade the French government to accept that?
Well, number one, you might ask them what they're doing with the £400 million of British
No, I'm asking you a different question. How would you persuade the French government to accept that?
Well, I just answered you. The first thing I would say is, can we have our money back, please? That would be the first
you
point.
How would you persuade the government to accept that?
So listen, there's a number of points here to be made. Firstly, you have to take away the incentive. That I agree with. You have to leave the ECHR. That I agree with. It'll never happen under the Tories. There's a reason it never happened is because the vast majority of Tory MPs are against.
Hang on. I've asked you a question here. Please answer. How would, it's a central part of your policy, as I understand it, you turn the boats around and deposit the people back on the beach in France, and France would just have to swallow that. How would you persuade them to do that?
Well, listen, I will say this. If the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom is unwilling to have an extremely difficult conversation with the leader of France about the sovereignty of our territory, which is basically being overwhelmed and overrun on a daily basis as a result of the Channel, I don't know about what the Prime Minister would be willing to have a difficult conversation.
So you don't know if you'd managed to persuade them or not. You can't be sure.
Well, there's a lot of ad hominem attacks to respond to there. So firstly, the notion that Nigel Farage is on the record as saying that we'd scrap the NHS, simply not true. The NHS is very close to my heart. My parents have given between them over 50 years of service to the NHS. My mother is a nurse, my father is a paediatrician. My mum is over 70, she still works full-time as a nurse. And going back to the great...
But hang on a second. Nigel Farage has said that the NHS funding model, I mean, he said this last year, the NHS funding model isn't working anymore. We need to fundamentally rethink the way we fund it. Let's look at the lessons of the French healthcare system. He only said this last year, and obviously the French healthcare system is a combination of insurance-based healthcare paid by employers, some private healthcare, and then some funded by the government.
At no point has Nigel ever said we'd scrap the NHS. He's been very clear we will keep the NHS free at the point of use. But let's also be really clear. The NHS isn't working for people. Over the last 2 decades, the cost, the amount of money every person in this country is paying into the NHS has increased by 50%. And in that time, elective waiting lists have increased by 70%.
So when he says let's change the way we fund and organise the NHS, what does he mean?
Let me finish. 19,000 people waited more than 3 days in accident and emergency in 2023. That is a third world statistic. The NHS currently, sadly, as much as I love it, my parents have dedicated their lives to it. It's very close to my heart. It is not working. And the notion that we can just keep throwing money at it, as I pointed out, we have to make some fundamental changes and ask some real questions about why so many people in this country are petrified of getting ill. And then I want to just also respond to the point about, are we a party for working people? We are the only party who are saying the first tax cut Nigel Farage will make as Prime Minister with our MPs is to raise the threshold at which point income tax is payable to £20,000 a year, so that people like nurses... Pardon?
How will you replace that lost...
Well, let me give you some examples. The £5 billion a year currently spent on asylum hotels, the £12 billion a year that you will find. With respect, please, sir. With respect, please, sir. Please let me answer the question.
But you haven't answered mine.
Sir, I'm answering the question. Please show me the respect to let me do so. £12 billion a year that you will find directly inside government budgets as a result of the net zero madness that is taking our energy costs to the highest levels in the world, and the £15 billion in foreign aid. How can you look Welsh people in the eyes and say it's OK for Welsh 15-year-olds' educational attainment in English, mathematics and science to be below the OECD average, while we're sending foreign aid, meaningful foreign aid, to countries like Turkey and Vietnam that score higher than them? There's nothing about it that's remotely acceptable. And I keep going back to this point. Reform, the decisions that we will make, will be in favour of citizens of the United Kingdom. We make no apology for that.
So, look, it's the first time we've had you on since you quit Reform last week. You quit saying trying to get Reform elected government was not a good use of your time. Now it is. What's changed? Still the same party.
Look, I'm on the record being very clear. I regret that tweet, and I basically worked 11 months, Fiona, without a day off. I'm very proud of what we achieved. In the 48 hours after I sent that intemperate tweet, which I regret, I was inundated with messages, very heartfelt and quite emotional messages, actually, from people who told me how important reform was to them. And frankly, and I'm paraphrasing almost all the messages, whether people agree or not, that people see, millions of people in this country see reform as really the last hope to turn this country around. I'm extraordinarily grateful and proud, and I feel very blessed to be back to try to do that and help turn around the country I love.
But when you talk about the messages of support, I mean, obviously your boss, Nigel Farage, to whom you are close, I assume, was talking about the fact that you decided to leave. And one of the things he mentioned that might be a reason, and these are his words, not mine, that interpersonal skills are not top of your list of personal attributes. What did you make of that?
Well, look, I think I'm a very results-oriented person. I care deeply about the mission. I worked as a volunteer. I sold my company in 2023. I didn't come from money. I think the United Kingdom's one of the few countries in the world where my story is even possible. I'm extremely passionate about this mission. I've dedicated pretty much my life to it since last summer. So I make no apologies for the fact that we've been a very results-oriented organisation. And as a result of that, we've gone from 14% in the general election last summer to polling at north of 30%. We've opened 400 branches. And, of course, we took control of 10 councils. And I think May the 1st, Fiona, will go down as the most historic set of local election results in this country's history. So very proud of what we've achieved.
Right, so...
Well, once again, quite a lot to respond to there. Can I go back to the lady in the front row talking about net zero? Look, net zero, we are in favour of clean air for ourselves, for our kids and for our grandkids. You will not find a more pro-nuclear, for example, party than Reform, including small modular reactors, where we have a national champion like Rolls-Royce. The issue is we should not be subsidising it. It's a regressive tax on working people, to the tune of £300 per year over the last decade to the average household in the UK. That's why people watching this programme, the people in this audience, are petrified to open their energy bills. If you want to have solar panels on your roof on your own dime, that's cool. I like Teslas, great cars. That's fine. But you should not be taxing, in a regressive way, working people in this country in order to achieve it. And we need to cut our energy costs. I keep going back to this. We will never have proper economic growth in this country if you have the highest energy costs in the world. The US pays 60% less than us. They're growing way faster. The Chinese pay 80% less than us. They are growing way faster. In terms of the Tories, I mean, somebody who sat alongside Liz Truss and inflicted that damage on this country, saying we're economic fantasists, is the ultimate of the pot, calling the kettle black. Nigel Farage is the only political leader that I can remember for a very, very long time who has ever stood up in front of the media and talked about making hundreds of millions of pounds of cuts in his first term as Prime Minister.
It have to be hundreds of billions, Zia.
Other than cutting net zero subsidies, when it comes to welfare, for example, when it comes to the NHS, for example, would you be making cuts there?
Well, I'll give you 32 billion a year of cuts straight away. As I said, 15 billion in foreign aid, 5 billion.
What about the question I've
5
just
billion
asked?
in asylum hotels, and the 12 billion on net zero. If you take something like welfare, and again, hearing a Tory talk about this, they took state spending as a percentage of GDP.
This question is about
They took state
reform,
spending.
Zia.
I
Would
am
you cut
answering
the welfare?
question,
Well, you
Fiona.
haven't yet. Would you cut the
we have
welfare
to
budget?
take. Look, we are on the side of working people and people who set their alarm clocks in the morning. It is way too easy in this day and age in the United Kingdom to get onto long-term welfare. And by the way, almost impossible to come off it.
Would you cut the welfare budget?
We are on the side of working people. So you can expect
I'm not sure what the answer to that is then.
Per capita, under a reform government, Fiona, per capita, you will see welfare spending reduced significantly. Yeah.
How?
A whole host of reasons. Number one, the highest proportion ever of young people are now on long-term disability and welfare benefits.
Yep.
That's the first thing.
Yep.
And the way you get
So what
onto
would you
that
do?
is, so number one, you actually have a proper assessment and testing process like you used to have before COVID. What happened during COVID, and you can go and look this up online, is the United Kingdom got addicted to welfare at a catastrophic cost. Countries like the United States,
OK, but just to be clear, because I want to bring...
So
I'm not trying to cut across, but just to be clear, because I want to bring more people in, there would be cuts. Fewer people would get welfare if
per capita welfare spending. We are on the side. We're unapologetic
is that
about
a yes?
this. We are on the side of people who set their alarm clocks in the morning.
OK.
Per capita welfare spending will come down under reform.
OK, so the man in the blue and white...